This is the Horse Radio Network. This is episode 291 of Horse Tip Daily, a different horse tip, a different equine topic, a different equestrian expert every day. Horse Tip Daily brings the world of equine knowledge to you one day at a time. Today's tip is sponsored by Equestrian Collections. Visit them at equestriancollections.com. Enjoy today's tip. Hi, Glenn the Geek back with you from Lexington, Kentucky, and welcome back to Horse Tip Daily. Today, we'd like to welcome back our Doctor of Nutrition, Dr. Nerida Richards from Australia. She is also the founder and the person behind FeedXL, one of our good sponsors here on the Horse Radio Network at feedxl.com. Well, as you know, we have her back on a regular basis to talk about horse nutrition. And today is no exception, and we'll be right back with Dr. Nerida Richards after these words from Equestrian Collections about their fantastic shipping program. Equestrian Collections is a true innovator in the retail horse world, and they have done it again, this time with their new shipping program. It's called their Unlimited Shipping Program, and there are two options, and you can choose the one that's best for you. It's simple. Pay only $34.95 one time a year and get unlimited one-way shipping to you from Equestrian Collections. You heard right. Pay only $34.95 once a year for unlimited shipments. The second option is only $15 more. You pay only $49.95 for unlimited two-way shipping. That means even your returns will be covered. That's unlimited shipping both ways for as little as 15 cents a day. Think about it. Even if you ordered every day, you won't pay any more for those shipments. Now that's an innovative company at equestriancollections.com. Well, hi, Dr. Richards, and welcome back to Horse Tip Daily.
Hi, Glenn. Great to be back again.
You know, we have a picture of you on the website there at horsetipdaily.com. Just look up Dr. Richards on the left and check out her bio. Who's the horse with you?
That horse is a horse called Poet. He's actually a young quarter horse that I bred out of my mare, who I've had since she's 6 months old.
Oh, wow.
And she's 24 now. So she's been with me a long time, and that is her baby, who's not so small anymore.
Are quarter horses popular in Australia?
They are, yeah. They are certainly popular.
Oh, good. Yeah, I wasn't sure. Is there a prevalent breed there? Or is it like anywhere else? There's a lot of them.
To be honest, I'm really hopeless with bloodlines. As far as our Australian stock horse is very popular.
Yeah.
Quarter horses are very popular.
Are the Australian stock horse, that's similar to a quarter horse?
It can have quarter horse bloodlines in it.
Okay.
They tend to have quite a bit of thoroughbred back in their bloodline, so they tend to be a little bit finer than your traditional quarter horse. My horses actually probably look a little bit more like a stock horse than a quarter horse as well, because they're a bit taller and not quite so chunky.
Well, he's cute. In the picture.
He's a rat.
How is he?
But he's lovely.
Now, what kind of riding do you do?
At the moment, not very much, but I've had a little bit of a dabble in most things. I'm not a particularly competitive rider. I did a sport that we have in Australia called camp drafting, which you guys don't do, I think, but it's a little bit like, to start off with, it's like cutting. You have to cut a cow from the herd, but then you actually take it out and basically run a barrel pattern chasing the cow. So it's a lot of fun.
You have to chase the cow through the barrels?
They're trees, but it's basically in a barrel pattern.
Really?
Would be the easiest way to describe it. Yeah. So that's a really popular sport in Australia.
Wow. There you go. Who
So
knew?
I've done a little bit of that, a little bit of eventing, a little bit of show jumping, but nothing at a high level, just for the fun of it, because I enjoy it.
And now you started a family, so that's all on hold.
Yeah. It's funny enough.
That's what happens. Although we have our spotlight eventer for the 2010 radio show, which is the World Equestrian Games radio show that we do. We were following one athlete out of each discipline, and she's out of Canada by the name of Jessica Phoenix. And she's about your age, actually, a little bit younger, but she had her first child in April. She rode until the day before.
Wow.
And then, you just had a baby, so this is going to mean something to you. And then 3 weeks later, she was competing in an advanced level event.
I take my hat off to her.
And that was in April. Beginning of April, she had that baby, and she is now qualified for the WAG, so she'll be riding at the WAG.
Good on her.
That's
great.
We were going, are you just you're just plain crazy. So
Yeah.
she's the nicest, sweetest girl you ever want to talk to, too.
Well,
There you go. And now she's carrying a baby around in one of those papoose things. What do they put it on the front?
Yep.
I forget what they're called. But you see pictures of her now doing lessons with the baby strapped in. So
that's great.
baby's going to know how to ride by the time it's one.
Yep.
All right, Dr. Richards, we're here to talk about, I always get off on the topic. Sorry about that. But we're here to talk about nutrition.
Yes.
What's today's topic on the agenda?
So today we're going to talk about putting weight on a horse. And most people are probably going to switch off about now and groan and go, oh, that's completely the opposite problem to what I have.
In America, we don't usually have that problem.
Believe it or not, though, there is horses that do have problems putting on weight.
Well, we've had a lot more of that. I don't know about you guys, but we've had a lot more of that, and it's become a big problem since the economy went south. There, horses that have been neglected and let go, and so there's a lot more people now taking horses in that need to be refitted, and that's what we're talking about today, doing that safely. So.
Yes, yeah. And also, I mean, there's a lot of horses, thoroughbreds and standardbreds that come out of their racing stables. They'll often lose quite a bit of weight while they're in their racing preparation, so they need to put weight back on, and healthy weight, so they can do like fat and muscle. They need to put it back on before they can go back in and have another racing preparation. People who take thoroughbreds and standardbreds as riding horses after they've been in a racing stable, they often need to put weight on before they're presentable to take out to shows and things like that. So there is people who do need to put weight on horses, even though most of us have problems keeping it off. But so we're just going to go through 7 steps for putting weight on a horse. And the first couple are pretty standard ones that everyone would have heard. The first one is make sure the horse is wormed with an effective wormer, because if your horse has got a heavy worm burden, there's no way known you're going to get weight back on it. So that one's pretty basic. The second one is have a qualified dentist correct any issues with the horse's teeth. Now, there's various studies showing that correcting a horse's teeth does help with weight gain. There's also studies that show that correcting a horse's teeth doesn't actually do much for weight gain. But I'm
on the first camp.
Yeah,
I'm a big believer that if my teeth hurt that bad, I'm not going to eat as much either. So
no, true.
Yeah, I mean, it can't. My theory is it can't hurt to have the teeth correct.
Exactly,
yeah.
Exactly. You don't want, particularly with a horse that's needing to put on weight, you don't want them in any kind of pain whatsoever. So if there's pain in their mouth from teeth, giving them problems, they're not going to eat as much as they probably should, and also just being in pain affects a horse's ability to put on weight. So the third step is ask your veterinarian to carry out a full health check and make sure there's no underlying diseases, and gastric ulcers is one that comes up all the time in horses that are having problems putting on weight. So check particularly for things like gastric ulcers and any other problems that might be stopping this horse from putting on weight. So even things like lameness in the front legs, if they're sore in their front legs, they're not going to want to have their head down grazing for long periods of time because it hurts. So anything like that your vet can find will help your horse. So in the newsletter that's on our website, we've got a little note there saying if your horse is emaciated, you need to be really careful how you feed them to put on weight. And you can work with your vet to develop a feeding program. And there's also a link in our newsletter to the refeeding guidelines published by the American Association of Equine Practitioners. And it's a good idea to follow those if you are feeding one of those walking skeletons back to health.
Okay, great. And I wanted to mention that you guys do have a lot of good newsletters at FeedXL, so I want to throw that in there. They're worth taking a look at and printing off.
Yeah, all of these tips that we're talking about have got a newsletter. So if you're struggling to keep up with what I'm saying, it's great to go and have a read of the newsletter as well.
Right.
So step 4, and this is probably the most important one, and it's also probably the thing that's most overlooked by people trying to put weight on their horses, is make sure the horse has access to as much hay and or pasture, so as much forage as it can possibly eat, free access all day. We tend to get quite focused on feeding, your higher energy, fancy type feeds for putting on weight, and forget about the basics of feeding and making sure that they've got enough forage. But it's the most important thing you can do is make sure that they've got heaps of hay or pasture available to them, and as literally as much as they can eat. So, make sure that there's a little bit left over each day without, walking it all into the ground and wasting it.
Now, do we worry about, because we're in an area where the grass is very lush, and we're talking about, right now we're talking about when the horses are actually beyond the skeletal, where eating too much is going to hurt them. So that's where I'm a little confused here. Because you can feed too much of this grass to horses, or, a founder and everything else. So are we beyond that point? Are we talking about horses that are just... just at that stage 3 and 4, or are we talking about horses in 1 and 2? Where are we at?
You're talking about condition scoring.
Yes.
So
sorry about that. Yep.
Anywhere. So I'm talking about horses that are sort of in condition score 2, 3, and 4, and you want to get them sort of up to 5 and 6 condition score. So those horses. Generally, with your pastures, and there's always going to be exceptions to this rule, but generally with your lush pastures and pastures that have got high levels of sugars and starches that cause the laminitis problems for horses, they'll generally cause those problems if that horse is what they call insulin insensitive or has insulin resistance. So when they eat those sugary pastures, they get a big spike in insulin, and it looks like it's the insulin that actually triggers the path of events that then leads to laminitis. So it's typically the fat horses that have insulin resistance, and generally horses that are quite light in condition have good insulin resistance. So the likelihood is that they'll be able to eat those pastures with no problems. But it comes down to knowing your own individual horse. So if you know that your horse can't handle that type of pasture, then it might be a case of limiting its amount of pasture turnout time. So, you might turn it out on the pasture early in the morning when the sugar levels are lowest, and then bring it in to a yard or a dry lot. But in there, make sure that it's got access to as much Timothy hay or Bermuda grass hay or whatever type of hay you've got access to, as much of that as it can eat for the rest of that 24-hour period.
Okay, great. Yeah, all right. We see a lot of muzzles here in Kentucky.
Yeah, that was the first place I saw a muzzle. That was before they'd come out in Australia. But just remember, we're talking about horses here that need to put on weight. So muzzles are generally on a horse that is too heavy and needs to lose weight.
Right.
So just keep that differentiation there.
Okay.
The next step for putting on weight, and this is one that I really do quite like, is feeding alfalfa hay together with the grass-based hay. Now, alfalfa has got lovely protein in it, and it's also higher in energy than your grass hay. So to put weight on, a horse needs to eat more calories than it actually needs to maintain its body on a day-to-day basis, so that the extra calories and the extra protein as well can then be laid down as more muscle and some condition. So that's the whole aim of the game. So by feeding some alfalfa hay, you're adding a higher energy forage, and it's also got this really lovely quality protein in there, and it does do a lot for horses that need to gain weight. Now, people often ask, well, how much alfalfa hay should you use? And it's really, again, it comes down to the individual horse and how much weight they need to need to gain. Now I'm doing it. But I usually say start between half a pound and 1 pound per 100 pounds of body weight. So that, that's a good starting place. And if you think your horse needs more, you can feed more. If it doesn't agree with that particular horse, then you can feed less or take it out altogether. But it is a really nice addition to a horse's diet that needs to gain weight. And in some cases, for some horses, you might find that that's all you need to do with their diet, apart from, and we'll get to this in a second, apart from making sure the diet is balanced, because we've talked about this in other tips. If the diet isn't balanced, it's whatever's missing is going to limit that horse no matter what you do. So if something like, I don't know, vitamin B1 and selenium are missing, that could well limit that horse's ability to put on weight, because just won't be as healthy as it could be, and that will hold the horse back. So you need to make sure the horse's diet is balanced. But for some horses, just increasing the amount of hay or pasture they've got access to and adding some alfalfa hay is all they need to put on weight. It may just be that the horse just wasn't getting enough fibre. We actually had a really nice email from a lady, or a testimonial from a lady the other day in Los Angeles, saying that she has this old quarter horse and she was struggling putting weight on him. And she said this is her words, supplementing him up the wazoo, like just feeding him, all these supplements that he really didn't need. And when she put his diet through Feed XL, basically all it told her was that he needed more hay in his diet. And the barn that he was stabled at wouldn't change his diet according to how she wanted him fed, so she moved him to a new barn, and apparently the people at the new barn now say that he's a different horse. And that little story is actually going to be published in the Californian Riding Magazine. But see, so it can be as simple as just feeding them more hay.
And here in the United States, there are places where hay is just so expensive that's why the barns are going, I don't want to feed them any more hay. And it is very expensive here in places, and in other places it's not so bad. Where we live, obviously it's not so bad, but
well, when you're in Los Angeles and trying to feed a horse, I imagine it would be quite expensive to feed them hay.
Florida is very expensive. My brother lives down there, and he'll pay $14 to $20 a bale.
Yep.
And we pay $2 to $3 a bale here. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
we pay 14 to 20, pretty standard.
Really?
Through winter. Yeah.
How do you
So it is. Hay is one of the most expensive parts of a horse's diet, but it's also the most important part, because if you skimp on feeding hay, you're going to affect the whole health of their gut, because they need to be filled up on forage to be healthy, basically, and you need to keep their hindgut healthy, which we'll talk about later on. But if you skimp on hay, then you're going to affect the whole process of digestion and how easy it is for that horse to maintain his weight.
All right, great. And of course, you can find out more about your horse by just plugging his information into feedxl.com. That's Dr. Richards' website, and it's very informative. It's worth checking out. There's a lot of good stuff there. And of course, these papers we talked about are there and available as well.
Yep.
So that's at feedxl.com.
Can I just add just the last...
Sure.
Sorry.
I thought you were done. Go ahead.
No, there's heaps more you can do. So for some horses, just adding more hay is going to be enough. If it's not enough, just adding more hay, then you're going to need to step up to adding some higher energy feeds to your horse's diet. And these fall into three categories. So there's your high energy fibers. Probably the one that you're going to be most familiar with is sugar beet pulp.
Yep.
There's
beet
also
pulp.
things like beet pulp. So also things like soybean hulls and copra meal fit into this category. What they are, these feeds have basically got the same amount of energy as oats, but they're high energy fibers, so they're really easily digested fibers, and they're a great way for increasing the energy content or the calorie intake of a horse's diet without actually adding grain to the horse's diet. So if you've got a horse that gets a little bit touchy if he goes on to grain-based feeds, but you need to put weight on, then using these high-energy fibres is a great option. Cereal grains and your grain-based feeds, so all of the sweet feeds you see and the pelleted feeds that you've got available, they're nearly all grain-based. Adding them to the horse's diet will increase calorie intake. And a grain has, say, 12 to 14, I'm going to talk in megajoules now, megajoules per kilogram. It'll give you a comparison anyway. 12 to 14 megajoules per kilogram of energy, whereas a hay might only have, say, 7 to 8.5. So you can see that they are quite a bit denser in energy. They've sometimes got double the amount of energy as what a hay will. So adding them allows you to increase calorie intake, but with a much smaller amount of feed. And then your last high energy feed you can add is your high fat feed, so your rice bran based feeds, and also just your straight oils, which have got about 3 times the amount of energy as grain does. So they're a really good way to add a lot of calories to the diet in a small meal. So what we find with horses that have trouble maintaining weight is they're often finicky eaters as well, which is probably half the reason why they don't maintain their weight very well. So you can't just give them massive feeds. So with ones that don't eat very much, using oil is a really good way to increase the energy concentration of the diet without increasing the size of the meal as such. And the other advantage of oils is that they tend to not make a horse as hyperactive as the same amount of energy.
Right, it's the same amount of sweet feed. Yeah.
Yeah, so they are a good good way to go if you've got a horse that needs to put on weight. And just while we're talking about that too, that's the biggest problem with weight gain diets is they do tend to make a horse far more energetic in its behaviour than what it would be just on a maintenance diet. So if you've got a horse that needs to put on weight and that you're also wanting to ride and show, it's a great idea if you can turn them out and let them put on weight so that you're not having to deal with their behavioural issues while you're trying to get them to put on weight. It's brilliant because you can get the weight on them that you need, and then you can bring them back to a diet that will just maintain that weight so that you can ride them when they're not being fed such a high energy diet. The exception, I guess, to that is if your horse is really well educated, then generally it won't be a problem. But if you get an off the track thoroughbred that has only ever learnt to race and run around a track, it's really, really hard to feed them to put on weight and also educate them at the same time. So do one or the other. Don't try and do both of them at the same time. And the last step, and again, this probably should be first, but make sure the diet is balanced. And again, using FeedXL makes this really simple. You put in your horse's details, put in what you're feeding, and it will show you if all of its nutrient requirements are being met. So all your minerals and vitamins, protein and energy. And it'll also help you work out, with the amount of hay that you're feeding, how much sweet feed, for example, you need to add, or how much oil you should add to the diet. So you're not guessing sort of, well, if I feed 2 pounds of sweet feed and a cup of oil, is that enough to put weight on my horse? It will actually give you a pretty good indication of whether you're feeding enough calories in that diet to cause weight gain in your horse. And that the only other thing I would say is don't be impatient when you're trying to get a horse to gain weight. I often liken them to a massive ship trying to turn around. First of all, you have to sort of try and stop and then turn and then head back the other way. And that process of stopping and turning them, especially if they are losing weight when you're getting them, it actually takes quite a while because they do have damage when they're breaking down proteins in their body. They'll actually break down some of the proteins in their gut and different internal organs. So they'll repair all of that damage before they actually start putting visible weight on, and that can take some time to do.
All right.
Just patient.
I didn't want to interrupt again, so... Are we?
I'm done now.
Oh, you're done. Thank you, Dr. Richards. We appreciate it. And, of course, the website is feedxl.com. Thank you to Dr. Richards for joining us and doing these nutrition tips. She's very thorough, and it's very, very interesting stuff. I want you to also go to the website and check out Horse Tip Daily number 291. Check out the show notes picture there. That's a little guy named Newman that a friend of ours by the name of Darcy rescued from starving to death. He pretty much was on his last legs when she got him out of the situation he was in. And he's cute as the dickens, but that just shows you how skinny he was when she got him, and now he's doing much, much better. And she pretty much followed the principles that Dr. Richards was talking about there. And his name is Newman. And he's pretty much was the inspiration for the new logo at the Horse Radio Network, the little guy with the microphone. And if you look at this particular picture of Newman and then look at the logo for the Horse Radio Network, you'll see a resemblance there. So we appreciate Dr. Richards and appreciate Darcy letting us use the picture of Newman, who was a perfect example of a little guy that needed to go through this regimen that Dr. Richards was talking about. And we'll be back again tomorrow with another new expert and a different horse tip. Until then, stay safe, everyone.